Recording has started. Hello and welcome to the Brentwood-Darlington Neighborhood Association virtual candidate interview series. My name is Chelsea Powers and I'm the current chair for Brentwood-Darlington Neighborhood Association, also known as BDNA. In normal circumstances, BDNA would host in-person events to help our neighbors get to know local candidates. Since these are not normal circumstances, we have decided to interview candidates virtually. Today's interview is with Sarah Iannarone.
Iannarone, you had it right.
I second-guessed myself with Sarah Iannarone, candidate for Portland Mayor. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, and please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Chelsea, thank you for making this opportunity possible. I am so excited by the work that you and your neighbors have been doing just to the south of me and mine. So my name is Sarah Iannarone. I have lived adjacent to your neighborhood in the Mount Scott Arleta neighborhood since 2003 for the most part. And what we have been working on together is making sure that this is not an area of disinvestment, of displacement, of despair, but a place of robust investment and emplacement, affordability, opportunity, and hopefulness. And so this is a wonderful chance for me to sit down with you, talk through my ideas about how we can address some of our most pressing challenges, and I hope think through how new leadership in City Hall at this critical time could serve neighborhoods like ours better. A little background about me. I am a former small business owner. In 2006, I opened then with my partner, the Arleta Library Bakery Cafe across the street from the Mount Scott Community Center. Unfortunately, that business has since closed. The owner, Nick, was forced to close due to COVID, and I think that's going to be a loss to 72nd Avenue. But fortunately, we are bolstered by wonderful opportunities close to Foster Road, like the Portland Mercado. So hopefully we'll get back up and lively in the wake of COVID. But we can talk a little bit about COVID recovery. So that is my small business background. Also with my neighbors, in the Mount Scott Arleta Neighborhood Association, where I currently serve as the Land Use and Transportation Chair. We built the Arleta Triangle project, which is at the corner of Southeast 72nd in Woodstock. That was an effort to connect our neighborhoods. Actually, we had seen several traffic accidents at that intersection, and we know that traffic along Woodstock Boulevard moves so quickly. And so what we thought was connecting so many of our neighbors who walk or bicycle from your neighborhood into that civic gem at the heart of all of these outer Southeast neighborhoods, that Mount Scott Park and Community Center. Could we make that passage safer, more pleasant, and actually create attractors out here? You know, fancy neighborhoods have gates across them or big archways. And for us, it was just a small gesture to increase neighborhood livability and a positive sense of progress for our community. Since then, I've worked really hard on traffic safety improvements along Foster Road, thinking about how we can ensure more affordable housing in our neighborhoods and prevent people from being displaced, how we can work on climate action investments, things as simple as the sidewalks, which I know that your neighborhood invested heavily in a campaign to get better pedestrian capacity in your neighborhood. Those are the types of things that I robustly support and would love to see more of to shape outcomes in City Hall. I've worked for 10 years at Portland State University, hosting visiting leaders from around the world who come here to learn what's happening in Portland. And they come maybe because they heard that we stopped the Mount Hood Freeway and invested in light rail, or that we were an innovator early on of eco roofs and things that set us apart as a green city leader. But you and I know that that brand does not match up to our lived experience, especially in neighborhoods like ours. But there are so many good things going on in our neighborhoods that do craft and help us chart a path toward a more sustainable future. So I take visitors out to Malden Court Community Orchard, and we talk about the transformation of these forgotten spaces, things like investments in parks and community centers, and how can we work on traffic safety investments in places where it's hard, like 82nd Avenue or Flavel. So this is the background I bring. I'm looking forward to answering questions, and don't hesitate to reach out as well. My campaign is very accessible. My email address is sarah@sarah2020.com, and that's Sarah with an H, S-A-R-A-H. And my website is sarah2020.com. And there's a feature where you can schedule a 10-minute phone call with me called Talk to Sarah. So if there's anything that I wasn't able to answer for you in this rather one-way conversation, don't hesitate to reach out and I will try to follow up with you and we can talk one-on-one.
Excellent. Now, BD&A asks neighbors to submit questions and combine the results into 6 questions for this interview. And you, Sarah, of course, received those questions prior to this interview. The first question is, in view of the Clackamas County wildfire crisis, what can the city government do to improve its procedures for disseminating emergency information to residents? Additionally, what should the city government do to better prepare residents and structures for the anticipated Cascadia subduction event?
This is such an important question, and we watched so many of us refreshing our phones night after night as those fires encroached on the Multnomah County line from the south. I know that I, along with many of you, were checking that closely at the height of that crisis. But even prior to that, we saw what was happening in the wake of George Floyd's tragic murder and how that was creating social upheaval. And prior to that, we saw the impacts of COVID and the need for comprehensive communications, but also robust community-led solutions in a time of crisis. I maintain the philosophy that social cohesion is in fact our first responder in times of crisis. And I am so proud of the work that the neighborhood emergency team lead, Jim Weisgram, has made at our neighborhood association, Mount Scott Arleta. But these ad hoc responses, I don't think are going to be enough. We need a city-wide investment in a few things. And I proposed them back in 2016 when I ran for mayor, but only came in third. And now I'm hoping to come in first so that we can implement them. We need to focus on community resilience as the basic of our civic engagement. We are a city that is largely divided in many ways, but I see us coming together in the things that we share. A prosperous, sustainable future where everyone feels safe, where everyone has opportunity and everyone has a safe place to sleep at night, safe transportation, and is protected in a time of crisis. And that is why something like disaster preparedness is a tool that we can use for healing. Because no matter who you are, what block you live on, your nation of origin, your religion, the color of your skin, you need to be prepared in a time of crisis. And so thinking about how we can use our community capacity, not just in the Office of Civic Life, to create community-wide communication channels across the bureaus so that it's not coming bureau by bureau, but we have more centralized communications. We've made a little progress on that during COVID, but we need to make better progress. Making sure that our democracy is very healthy and that our neighborhoods are engaged, and not just at the neighborhood association level, which I do appreciate and value, but that we're really investing in the diversity mandate of getting many voices to the table to meet our shared goals. We need to make sure that shoring up our community defenses is a priority. We saw in the wake of the wildfires last week how community came together in response. We will continue to see community leading on response efforts in times of crisis. And so we can't take that for granted. We can't underinvest in it. We should be investing in that, and we should be investing in it as a matter not only of public safety, but of good democracy. So I'm going to keep the Office of Civic Life in my portfolio, and we're going to work very hard on making sure that our communications across the city and our preparation efforts are coordinated, efficient, and inclusive.
Excellent, thank you. All right, question 2. To lessen tensions between police and residents and to relieve the Police Bureau of responsibilities not directly related to keeping the peace, how should the city government reshape or recast the Portland Police Bureau?
This really relates to the last question. We need to ask ourselves as a city, what are you afraid of? I wonder what my neighbor to the south is afraid of. I wonder what my neighbor to the north is afraid of. What am I afraid of? And when I'm afraid, where do I go for help? Who do I call? For so many of our neighbors, 911 is not an option. We know there are people experiencing intimate partner and domestic violence who do not feel comfortable calling 911. We know our BIPOC neighbors do not feel comfortable calling 911. Oftentimes our immigrant and refugee community members don't feel comfortable calling 911. Do they not deserve to feel safe here? We as Portlanders need to understand that everyone deserves the right to feel safe here. And our mission for this generation, I believe it will be a generational shift because this is a transformative moment, but the work that we have to do is immense, is rethinking public safety so that everyone feels safe. And that is why my team and I proposed last November, prior to the current protests that began in May, that we needed to do a rethinking of public safety. And what that was looking at was drawing down wasteful spending on things like we've seen in recent months, $1.5 million on police overtime at protests, intense amounts of use of tear gas and chemical weapons at protests. Things like that are not effective problem solvers. What we need to do is invest in healthy communities. And so whether we're talking gun violence prevention and how we can look at upstream interventions like anti-displacement and making sure that we're not having high school turnover, even as we draw down the budgets for things like the gun violence reduction team and the school resource officers, we need to make sure that as we are transforming our public safety systems, that we're not just decreasing the budget for militarized interventions, but that we're increasing the budget for community-led solutions like Portland Street Response, where we know out in our neighborhood, there are so many people experiencing homelessness. And what does it mean for us to send an efficient, compassionate, trauma-informed response to someone in mental health crisis, as opposed to a militarized police response for which people are, frankly, the police aren't compensated for this work and it's outside their purview. So we really need to send the right solutions to those problems. And ultimately, there's work already underway. Commissioner Joanne Hardesty has a ballot measure in November. I hope you will support it in terms of robust community oversight of policing. We have a lot of work to do in terms of our DOJ settlement and excessive use of force there to make sure that we're in compliance. And we also have to think carefully about the community engagement process for these discussions. It brings us back to the first question of how do we bring our city together in shared problem solving? Divisiveness is not working. We need everyone facing in the same direction on this, and we need a healthy democracy so that we can have these conversations in ways that are productive, healthy, and ultimately get us where we need to go.
Thank you. Question 3. What actions can the city government take to help resolve the homelessness crisis?
This is a place where the incumbent and I significantly differ. The lack of progress on this, on his watch, has been abysmal. We have seen where he campaigned in 2016, committing to having a shelter bed for every person experiencing homelessness. Forgive me, I'm here on dog duty right now, so you might hear my dog barking in the background. But what we've seen is that we failed on a few fronts pretty miserably, and we need to pick up the pace. But in recent weeks, we've seen the mayor doing the same thing that he's done time after time, which is picking fights with women in leadership when things aren't going his way. So whether it was with Governor Kate Brown on the COVID crisis, or Speaker Kotek on the use of tear gas, or Commissioner Joanne Hardesty on the transfer of the Police Bureau, and most recently with Chair Kafoury on the Joint Office of Homelessness Services, instead of coming to the table and problem solving in community, he tends to function unilaterally and somewhat petulantly. I bring a different approach. I am grounded in community. In 2017, when we had snowpocalypse, many of you helped as we opened the Mount Scott Community Center as an emergency warming shelter. It was one of the best experiences that many of the people in our neighborhood had had with that, whether they were housed or unhoused, because we were all together in that building working on shared solutions, whether it was cooking meals or bringing clothing or staffing it, or even residing there, but having access to things like showers and restrooms that they generally didn't have access to. So that was a learning experience for all of us. And what would it mean for us to replicate that model all around the city so that our civic infrastructure can be seen as something that we tap into in times of crisis, that we see mass shelters as our least favorite alternative when it comes to what needs to happen, but ultimately is there when times are very, very tough. We've seen that there can be positive changes made when we're talking about intentional transitional villages, tiny house villages, and other things where we can partner, like we have done with Pastor Matt Huff at the Nazarene Church on Powell, to innovate new solutions. And how can the city make it easier for those to come online? Oftentimes the bureaucracy makes it challenging for us to do that. There are a few places where we need to make better progress faster, and I do think that improving the relationship with the joint office is important, but also there are going to be new resources coming available from the recent measure passed by voters in May out of Metro. So we are going to have more resources for this. And what we need to think about is addressing chronic homelessness. We need to foreground displacement. Every single policy that we forward in our community needs to be foregrounding anti-displacement. Keeping people in place should be a priority in our thinking. We need to close the minority home ownership gap and make sure that people who've been locked out of the benefits of home ownership have real access. And what are some creative mechanisms we can use for that? Community land trusts and land banking. I'm thinking about the jurisdictional transfer of 82nd Avenue. Would it be possible for us to create community land trusts along that area so that even as we make infrastructure investments, people aren't displaced and people can have access to home ownership? And ultimately focusing on our schools where there is high turnover. One of the things that contributes to things like gun violence is gentrification. So preventing gentrification, making sure that our families who are renters are stabilized, and making sure that we're not allowing high turnover in some of our schools in what I call either the crescent of disinvestment, which runs along Columbia and Lombard out across East Portland, and then, as we know, back down along the county line, that we're shoring up all of our families and we're not allowing certain groups of people to move around and disrupt our social fabric while other communities remain stabilized.
Thank you. All right, question 4. What should the city government do to address the fact that in 2020, nearly 25% of the actions listed in the Multnomah County City of Portland Climate Action Plan from 2015 are facing serious impediments to implementation?
Well, this is one place where having someone who's promoting a Green New Deal as the basis of our economic development plan prior to COVID is going to come in handy. I was already working with leading experts on how can we move the needle on climate action faster. And what we put together in our Green New Deal for our Portland, which again is available on our website, is the best thinking from Green New Deals around the world and around this country that can be implemented at the municipal level. So what can the city of Portland do? And there is a comprehensive suite of both short, mid, and long range interventions that we can deploy, including things like banning natural gas hookups in new home construction, for instance. So looking at this model, we have to come back to investing in what we know best. And there are 2 places where I think we do that, not just for economic recovery, but for climate action. Small business and making sure that we're investing in economic prosperity for people locally, but infrastructure investments for climate mitigation and adaptation. Now, we already have seen remarkable progress on things like the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which passed 2 years ago now. The incumbent opposed the Portland Clean Energy Fund. I worked with the community to knock on doors and helped get that policy passed. And so I will be committed to shepherding and stewarding things like that, as opposed to siding with the Downtown Business Association when they come onto the table, but then taking credit for them after the fact when they've proven effective. But we also need to tap in to resources available to us in a time of COVID recovery. And can we see investments in infrastructure as stimulus? How can we use investments in things like municipal broadband and community energy as a way to put Portlanders back to work? So we have Portland Clean Energy Funds available, and we can continue to grow that model. We have federal stimulus money available that we could be using more strategically. Right now, we're deploying it rather ad hoc. And ultimately, we need to stop spending, wasting money throwing good money after bad on solutions that we know don't work, when we could be investing in things like fareless transit, which we know is much cheaper than expanding fossil fuel infrastructure when it comes to getting people out of congestion, expanding active transportation networks. Think about how many more people in your neighborhood could walk to school safely and save that school trip in an automobile if you had sidewalks. Those are climate action, and those help us kill 3 birds with 1 stone. They help us on our Vision Zero goals. They help us with our climate action goals, and they help us with our equity goals, because we know that the neighborhoods that need these investments most are our more diverse neighborhoods, our more socioeconomically challenged neighborhoods, and where we have the most opportunity to make progressive change. And so community energy investments, municipal broadband, where we could be connecting telecommuters with opportunity, or students, saving students that trip. We've learned that there are certain things that we don't need to commute around for. And so that means when we are moving around, we're doing it efficiently and effectively. A green climate mayor is going to be good for Portland. We haven't had one in about a decade, but I think someone like me that is deeply rooted in urban sustainability, but with a strong commitment to community-led solutions, is going to be exactly what we need right now.
Thank you. All right, question 5. When developing programs or designing projects, what can the city government do to bolster resident participation and improve communication with affected residents?
I love this question. Thank you for asking me, because 1, we don't ask this question enough of our elected officials, and 2, I have come up with a plan for that. And honestly, nearly every single policy I've proposed across my suite of reforms, whether that's the Green New Deal or rethinking public safety, housing for all, or even good government, are all community-led. But there are some concrete things that we can do to make sure that our programs and projects are not only involving our population, but our population are leading on. Because I understand that the power of innovation, the good ideas, the community capacity, the diverse voices that lead to better solutions are all embedded in community. So I don't see community engagement or public participation in policymaking as something that we have to do, or, oh, here, let me check that box so I can say that I engage the public, which we know, as especially neighborhood association members, happens to us a lot. Someone comes from the city and talks to our neighborhood, and we're supposed to like buy into that, oftentimes well after the fact, and when it may not meet our needs, but it seems largely okay, so why would we oppose it? That's a very inefficient model of policymaking. What I want to do, again, in addition to rethinking the Office of Civic Life, so that we're looking at very robust citywide engagement processes that are equitable, inclusive, and diverse, and that it's happening equally across bureaus. And so one bureau isn't doing a very good job at it and another bureau doing a very poor job at it, but that we have a similar approach across the city, is thinking about our planning bureau in particular, also Prosper Portland to a lesser extent, but how can we look at the existing capacity in that bureau so that we see them as technical support for community-led efforts, as opposed to them coming to the community for buy-in and them leading on that. There's a specific aspect in my Housing for All plan where we talk about something called green zones. It's an idea from Minneapolis, where even as things like the jurisdictional transfer of 82nd Avenue back to the Portland Bureau of Transportation, what would it mean for community to lead on the rethinking of 82nd Avenue? What would it mean for the community to shape that future? We've seen some leadership on that already from Pono in the Jade District, and how the rethinking of that as a commercial district is beginning. But what would it mean for us to invest in that way so that our planning bureau is at the disposal of the community when it comes to rethinking areas like that, as opposed to them coming after the fact often? And how can we make those strategic investments in ways that benefit the community in the long term, so that as we improve areas, the longtime residents of that place are not displaced, that their rents don't rise, that the small businesses that were able to thrive there for so long when no one was paying attention to us are suddenly displaced because now there's intensified capital interest and investment. This is what we need to fight for. And we need to put every resource in our city behind that work. And I believe that we can do it. It will be possible. I am going to maintain the urban development bureaus in my portfolio for better coordination across them, so that even as we do this work in our outer neighborhoods, that it is not having a negative impact on longtime residents, but having a net positive for the people who have lived there and contributed to the health and well-being of those places for so long.
Great, thank you. All right, last question. With an eye to advancing Portland's mission, goals, and values, what can the city government do to attain greater collaboration between itself and its 94 recognized neighborhood associations?
This is such a challenging question, and it really brings us to the thread that has woven across all of the questions that we've discussed today, which is, how do we bring Portland together in shared problem solving? If you go back to the first question about disaster preparedness, I alluded to it a little bit. We need to find the things that we share, the values we have in common, and tap into them. And I know recent polling shows that 75% of Portlanders believe that Black Lives Matter and that that movement is important. So when people say, are you a city divided on this? I say, no, we are united in understanding that Black Lives Matter, and we are committed to that. And I don't know who those 25% are who aren't, but we really need to work on educating them so they understand why every life here needs to matter, about how Black lives have been left out of that equation for so long. And we need to look at things like disaster preparedness and say, it doesn't matter where you grew up or how long you've lived here, you are our neighbor. And in a time of crisis, your well-being is important to us. And I don't care if you're in Laurelhurst or the West Hills or the Pearl District or Lentz. Us understanding that every human life has value, that every neighbor is worthy of care, that every human being is deserving of shelter and food and water and clean air to breathe and clean water to drink, is something that I know all Portlanders share. And I will never let anyone convince me that we don't, because this is a good place and there are good people working here. But we do have structures that have been racist and exclusionary for too long. And what does it mean for us to look at them with a critical eye and make sure that we're not requiring things like inclusion and diversity, but then not paying for it? We need to put our money where our mouth is and say, we are going to reach out across the city and make sure that every person feels welcome here, that we are shoring up community capacity for times of crisis, whether that's incursions from outside agitators, whether that's an environmental disaster or economic disaster, as we're seeing from COVID now. How do we build community capacity so that Portland is strong for whatever comes our way? And this is where having a mayor who's grounded in community, who understands and has deep faith in the power of community, and knows that if we continue to invest in communities, that we will be more prosperous for the future. Because ultimately, the lack of preparedness is a hidden tax on us. Inequality is a hidden tax on us. Divisiveness is a hidden tax on us. We spend so much time working to surmount these things that if we were able to work to dismantle them, we would be more prosperous for the future. So yes, coming together is a moral imperative, but it is also an economic imperative for us. We do not have the option of not doing this. So I believe that Portlanders coming together around these problem solving, based on our shared values, facing in the same direction to get this work done, is going to be the answer. Is it going to be easy? No, but we need leadership committed to that work, not quarreling with leaders at other levels of government, but going and working on shared problem solving and bringing different voices to the table and making sure that we're talking things through in meaningful ways, even as our society is bifurcated and galvanized and polarized at the national level. Portland can do better, we are better, and I really believe that this is possible here. And it's our responsibility, because many people from around the world are looking to us to lead on urban sustainability. They're looking to us to lead on dismantling the legacy of white supremacy. They're looking to us to lead on things like rethinking public safety and getting rid of the vestiges of gentrification and displacement, and making sure that our people are safe and secure here and prepared for the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for answering these questions. And would you like to make a final statement before we end the recording?
Sure. You know, we have to think about the future. When you close your eyes and you think about how Portland's doing right now, and you wonder, are we on the right track? How is it going? When was the last time I felt confident that we were headed in the right direction? Do things feel like they're getting better or they're getting worse? I mean, it's important to pause and really ask that question in this election cycle. Are things getting better on the incumbent's watch? My argument is that they're not. My argument is that we have either failed to make requisite progress, and the opportunity costs of that are staggering, but also we have fallen behind in many things. And I do not think that this is a time where we have the luxury of falling behind. We need to be thinking about what is the leadership that we need to get us out of these messes, frankly. This election is a choice between progress or continued decline. And I'm offering voters a clean break. I'm publicly financed, which means that I am not taking any large checks from corporations, special interests, PACs. I'm only taking small donations from individual people. And because of a public matching program, those are amplified, so they have similar power to what big donors have been able to bring to people who've been elected in City Hall before. I'm tired of protecting a Portland brand that doesn't match up with our lived experience. The precious Portland of Portlandia doesn't accrue to people east of 82nd Avenue. It's worlds apart. And so what does it mean if the New York Times thinks that Portland is quirky, if it doesn't play out in the lives of people at 146th and Stark? What does it mean if people in Japan think that we're a transportation leader, if people trying to get to work are stuck in traffic? That is not the city that we need to be. We need to put the focus back on the quality of life for every single Portlander in neighborhoods just like ours, and not just the people who are running big businesses, corporations, or happen to have the economic status of the incumbent. I'm a community-powered candidate. Everything I do is in community, and I believe that I offer really good solutions to our most pressing problems. And I believe that I offer them with the guiding vision of the city that we truly want to be, which, yes, it's green and sustainable, but it's also diverse, inclusive, and equitable. So that's my pitch to you. I'm asking for your vote this November. This is an important election. Please don't sit it out, regardless your choice. And if my message has resonated with you, I do encourage you to support me, to volunteer on my campaign, to donate to my campaign, to engage with my campaign with your questions so that we can learn and grow together. Visit my website at sarah2020.com. I'm happy to engage with you on the issues there. And I really thank you for your time and for your commitment to our communities. I know how hard you're working, and please keep it up.
For more information and other candidate interviews, please visit brentwood-darlington.org.